All right, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. We're continuing our virtual world. It's been something I've adjusted to and recognize how practical that is. But it kind of misses the sort of interaction I really relish in terms of giving the feedback you need and responding to how you are absorbing the info in real time. One of the things you'll learn in my 7 lectures I'm going to deliver to you this weekend is that it does recognize sort of the learning process in a tighter time frame that you're working with, assuming all of you are really pulling it all together for your upcoming written exam. In the short time period, my hope would be that most of this stuff is just review for you, but I do also recognize that there's gaps in knowledge that can be unforeseen in relationship to your training. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to work really hard for you today. And one of the things I really do in my presentations is I really try to deliver it so that there's not only delivery of the information, but there's also a process of imprinting. And if you recognize that that's happening, allow it to happen, okay? Because there's repetition, which can seem boring, but it's actually intended. There's Socratic questions, but unfortunately, because we're on a chat function, that may not play out the way we want it to. We'll use cases and we'll use questions to highlight everything. But my goal would be by the end of the lecture, majority of this stuff will have imprinted enough that going back to this isn't a relearn, it's just a review, if even needing to do that is necessary for you. So hopefully that's what we'll accomplish. I'm looking at the time frame here. My thyroid talk will stay on time based on the timing of the start of this presentation, maybe run over a little bit, but more than make up for it once we roll into the parathyroid and parapharyngeal, which are under an hour each. Okay, so that being said, management of the thyroid mass, I think this is obviously a very big topic that stretches across a large number of literature, but we will be focusing a lot of our discussion, again, focusing on the fact that this is a review course for boards, so you will see all that practical knowledge come out. I will emphasize some of that. A lot of this will be driven out of the ATA guidelines, which remains the most consistent piece of information that we could utilize. One of the things I'm going to cover right now are what I call the key facts around management of the thyroid. Facts that center around why we are interested in a thyroid mass because of this possibility of cancer, the most common being papillary carcinoma. What do we need to remember about the most common well-differentiated cancer of the thyroid? That it has excellent survival rates. It's come to light again about the extent of survival as being excellent. Sorry about that. That's my dog in the background. So hopefully it won't be too much interfering. That dog should settle down. Come on, Bogey. All right. You'll get to see him at some point, maybe. The survival data has actually been really tightened up where it's changed how aggressive we have been. In fact, one of the things you'll learn about thyroid management and thyroid disease is how thyroid cancer has been aggressively treated, shifted down a little bit to less aggressive, shifted back up to more aggressive. Now we're back into the more recent phase of being less aggressive based on these much longer longitudinal data around survival. Patterns of spread. This is your first sort of recall. Papillary cancer, is this more likely to be lymph node metastasis or hematogenous metastasis? Please feel free to interact with the chat function. The answer is lymph node metastasis. It's less consistent with hematogenous metastasis. Very good, MH. Mallory. Thanks, Mallory, for interacting. Appreciate that. The other aspect of papillary cancer is that it is a multifocal disease. This is critical. Multifocal is what's driven a lot of the, not controversy, but the discussion that's shifted back and forth about how aggressive, how less aggressive. Multifocal disease is the classic feature of papillary. So in other words, one site that's positive for a nodule with papillary cancer means that there's a percentage chance that multifocal, even microscopic multicentricity exists in the remainder of the gland. And there's been controversy about that multicentricity, about whether that's relevant, how much that affects survival, who should you worry about in terms of that percentage chance of having multifocal disease, and how does that influence our treatment? Again, we've downshifted and de-escalated to less aggressive therapy, even with that knowledge. The other fact that we need to center our thoughts on in terms of papillary is the histologic features. The classic features include what do you see in this picture that sort of you wish you would hope to see on, for example, your examination, seeing this picture, because this is about as tight as it gets and as classic as it gets to make the diagnosis of papillary cancer. So what are some of the things that you see on here? Right, Samoma bodies, what would those be? These structures right here. They show up actually radiographically, particularly with the larger concentrations, as calcification, either as multiple little dots or even one large collection of calcification. What else do you see here? Anybody? Orphananias, correct. So what are orphananias? These are the central nuclear clearing that you'll see on close up here. So I've just zoomed in, and you'll see the nucleus of the cells of interest, and you'll see that there's central nuclear clearing. Now that's the classic name Orphan Annie, but some of you may not recognize why it's called Orphan Annie. Orphan Annie is, for those of you who are into Broadway as I am, and the opportunity to see, I haven't seen Orphan Annie at Broadway, but one of the things you'll recognize that Orphan Annie came out of the cartoons, right? The cartoon that looks like, nope, not this. Okay, here's some shameless self-promotion. That's actually the one that was barking. He's much bigger now. So when you look at his eye, that's blue, but that's not what we're looking for. This is Orphan Annie eye. There's the dog. My dog's cuter than this one. This is kind of creepy looking, right? So what do you notice about the cartoon? No pupils, right? The Broadway play and the live actors had pupils. The cartoon does not have pupils. And so for those of you who are trying to understand why is it called Orphan Annie eyes, or have never given it a thought, give it a thought in part because this is what I call imprinting, right? Is that a cartoon had no pupils, therefore central nuclear clearing, as the picture has shown. All right, great. I'm usually seeing some interaction on live, but I recognize we're going to be limited on that. So sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself, but that's okay. Follicular adenocarcinoma, 20 to 30% of thyroid cancers. This is the second most common. One of the key features of follicular adenocarcinoma, in addition to having also excellent survival rates, the patterns of spread is a little bit different. What's a more likely pattern to spread with follicular adenocarcinoma in percentages? Lymph node or hematogenous? Hematogenous, thank you, LT, appreciate it. MPL, sorry, I'm using your initials, that's what's popping up for me. Hematogenous is right. And one of the things about the reason why the original aggressive thought for papillary was because of multicentricity. That's why you do totals, at least historically, on papillary cancer. The reason for doing totals on follicular adenocarcinoma, total thyroidectomies, is because of this higher percentage risk of hematogenous metastasis. So if you want to treat hematogenous metastasis, how do you treat that? What's the way to treat hematogenous metastasis of follicular adenocarcinoma? RAI, correct. So RAI, radioactive iodine, will concentrate on the metastasis, but that's only successful, that RAI, in terms of concentration of metastasis, if you have no thyroid tissue left in the neck. Otherwise, all the RAI will go into your incomplete total thyroidectomy. And even if you thought you did a total thyroidectomy and left that island or supracondyle, all of your RAI will go to the island or supracondyle and concentrate less in hematogenous metastasis. So thus, the historic interest in terms of why we do total thyroidectomies in follicular adenocarcinoma is to improve the role of radioactive iodine. So for papillary, total thyroidectomy historically has been important to deal with multicentricity, and in follicular adenocarcinoma, total thyroidectomy has been traditionally important for improving the role of radioactive iodine in a disease such as follicular adenocarcinoma, where there's a higher incidence of hematogenous metastasis. Making the sense? Great. Usually here's my feedback again, but I'm just going to keep rolling. Sometimes I'll laugh at myself just to make sure I know where I'm at. I apologize for that as well. Follicular adenocarcinoma, the problem is actually establishing the diagnosis. So one of the features of the discussion around whether we have the diagnosis of follicular adenocarcinoma is the reality, sorry about this, okay, is the reality that you can't establish the diagnosis of follicular adenocarcinoma with just a needle biopsy. So if you put a needle in, you'll see follicular changes, right? If you remove a lobe and isthmus with a mass in it, and you'll see follicular changes. And the diagnosis can be established as follicular adenoma, but the only way to establish that it's truly adenocarcinoma, excuse me, is to identify what? What is it that we need to identify to establish that a follicular adenoma is actually adenocarcinoma? Vascular invasion. Excellent. Well done. So here is an example of that vascular invasion. If you can see my pointer, right? You can actually see, what is that? That's endothelial lining of the vascular structure within the thyroid gland. Here is the follicular adenoma, now becoming diagnostically on histopath a follicular adenocarcinoma because of the, right there, the invasion, angio invasion of the vessel. And thus this relationship tightens your understanding that follicular adenocarcinoma has a higher incidence of hematogenic metastasis, because this is the pattern of behavior, and this is how you establish the diagnosis. So you can imagine that two limitations on histologic diagnosis is the fact that needle biopsy placed anywhere in this specimen is not going to show you the architectural microinvasion, right? And actually, the other issue, which is leading sometimes to this question I get asked very frequently on oral board review, is what's the role of frozen section? Can you establish a diagnosis of follicular adenoma versus follicular adenocarcinoma on frozen section? The answer is you could, if you're awfully lucky, to catch this finding. And the problem with frozen section is frozen section can do some challenges with regard to architectural preservation. So that's why you rely on permanent section. You take the nodule, needle biopsy shows follicular adenoma, cannot rule adenocarcinoma. You remove the lobe and isthmus, you don't send it for frozen, you wake up the patient, you wait for permanent, and then you see on permanent section if there is evidence of this angioinvasion to establish whether this is follicular adenocarcinoma. And in traditional terms, you consider doing a total thyroidectomy because you want to improve the role of what? Radioactive iodine, because that is our key way of maintaining excellent survival for this higher incidence of hematogenic metastasis. But again, I'm talking to you right now in terms of that tight traditional pattern of why we do totals. What I will do with the remainder of the talk is adjust that thinking based on the most current guidelines of ATA guidelines, but you will not understand that adjustment until you understand these two fundamental principles about total thyroidectomy and why for papillary and follicular. So that was a lot in the first couple of slides here, but that should be really tight for you now, okay? I stated how it's not identified on FNA and frozen section. I said why and why that's important. A sidebar, so off of the follicular adenocarcinoma discussion, we can include the Hürthle cell variant. Hürthle cell variant of follicular adenocarcinoma is more aggressive. Hürthle cells have the oncocytic changes with cellular enlargement and eosinophilic granular cytoplasm. But we also recognize, and this is an example of that Hürthle cell variation within a follicular neoplasm. The issue is that, again, just like a needle biopsy showing follicular adenoma doesn't necessarily mean you have cancer. Well, same with Hürthle cells. When you do a needle biopsy and you see Hürthle cells, does that automatically mean you have a Hürthle cell variant of follicular adenocarcinoma and therefore an aggressive cancer, and therefore you need to be aggressive just based on the needle biopsy that says you have Hürthle cells? Answer is no. You need to finish the workup. Hürthle cells on needle biopsy, again, gets back to the issue of lack of architecture and more complete histologic evaluation. Hürthle cells are also seen in Hashimoto's thyroiditis or multinodular goiter. So obviously we don't want to find ourselves operating unnecessarily, particularly on an endocrine dysfunction patient who does not need surgery, such as a Hashimoto's patient. So one of the things is again, if you have a nodule and you do a needle and there's a Hürthle cell neoplastic process in that nodule, while that could represent an aggressive Hürthle cell adenocarcinoma, it also percentage-wise will be more likely benign. So one of the traditional steps in this situation it has been to do a lobe isthmus for the same reasons you would do a lobe isthmus for follicular adenoma neoplasm to see if you have to see if you have follicular and adenocarcinoma. You would do the same for Hürthle cell neoplasm to do a lobe isthmus to see if you have a Hürthle cell adenocarcinoma. Okay. All right. Again, talking in traditional terms, we're going to say what has changed in relationship to our keen understanding of those traditional terms. Now, I gave you those traditional terms. I would say in your brain, papillary cancer sits in its own category. So everything I just said about multicentricity for papillary, and I said for angiovasion, hematogenous for follicular, medullary cancer has to sit in its own category. And in that understanding, much of the survival data doesn't apply to medullary cancer. So one of the reasons that we certainly recognize this